When an INFJ enters extreme survival mode, something extraordinary and terrifyingly profound happens beneath their calm, reflective surface. It is not the typical kind of survival that involves running from danger or fighting for food and shelter. For the INFJ, survival mode is a deeply psychological and emotional transformation, a defense mechanism born out of prolonged betrayal, exhaustion, or emotional trauma. It is when their empathy, sensitivity, and idealism collapse under the weight of too much pain, and the INFJ begins to function from a place of pure instinct rather than compassion. At first glance, it looks subtle. INFJs rarely explode outwardly when they're breaking inside. Instead, they retreat inward, silently reconstructing their internal landscape to protect what's left of their emotional core. They start by shutting down the very functions that make them who they are. Their warmth, intuition, and openness become guarded, sharp, and strategic. Every conversation becomes calculated. Every gesture is filtered through the question, "Is this safe for me?" They begin to see people not as souls to understand, but as patterns to predict. Their intuition, once used to heal and connect, becomes a weapon that allows them to anticipate threats and emotional manipulation before it even happens. In this state, the INFJ is no longer motivated by the desire to help others or to maintain harmony. The extrovert feeling function, which normally drives them to nurture and understand, begins to wither. They stop caring about how others feel because they've learned, through painful experience, that compassion without boundaries is self-destruction. Instead of pouring themselves into others, they conserve their energy with surgical precision. Their kindness becomes selective, their empathy rationed. They don't hate people. They just no longer feel safe around them. It's as if the INFJ builds invisible walls around their soul. Walls made not of bitterness, but of necessity. If you want to truly understand yourself and unlock your full potential as an INFJ, check out the INFJ Playbook today. The link is in the description of this video. When this survival mode deepens, something darker emerges. The INFJ's introverted intuition and introverted thinking begin working together in an almost eerie way. They detach emotionally, observing the world with a kind of cold, detached logic. They analyze everything: people's motives, body language, tone of voice, inconsistencies in stories, like a strategist preparing for war. It's no longer about connection. It's about comprehension. The INFJ starts to think like a chess player who's been betrayed too many times, moving quietly, anticipating every possible outcome, and ensuring they're never caught off guard again. The once selfless INFJ can become extremely private, even secretive. Their trust issues become deeply rooted, not out of paranoia, but out of experience. They've seen what happens when they give too much. They've watched their love be taken for granted, their forgiveness mistaken for weakness, and their honesty used against them. So now, they give nothing freely. They become masters of silence, revealing only what they choose to, and withholding what protects their peace. They know that silence, for them, is not avoidance, it's self-preservation. This version of the INFJ also develops an uncanny ability to mask their emotions. They can appear composed, even cheerful, while internally they are calculating every detail of their environment. They study people's energy like a scientist studies data, identifying who is genuine, who is manipulative, and who is dangerous. It's a kind of emotional camouflage. They blend into their surroundings to survive mentally and spiritually. They no longer chase validation or belonging. They are content being misunderstood if it means staying untouched. The INFJ's moral compass also shifts in survival mode. They still value integrity, but it becomes less about being good and more about being wise. They realize that goodness without wisdom invites exploitation. So they start to play by new rules, rules of discernment, boundaries, and quiet power. They can now walk away from anyone or anything that threatens their emotional equilibrium without a trace of guilt. The INFJ who once over-explained their worth now lets their absence speak volumes. One of the most haunting aspects of INFJ survival mode is their emotional numbness. It's not that they don't feel. They feel everything, but they've trained themselves to suppress it because emotions have brought them too much pain. Love becomes a concept they understand intellectually, but avoid experiencing fully. They may still care for people, but they no longer allow themselves to depend on anyone emotionally. Relationships become controlled environments where vulnerability is carefully managed. They build safety into solitude. To outsiders, they seem cold, distant, or even unfeeling. But beneath that stillness lies a heart that's simply tired of breaking. Yet, even in this hardened state, there is a strange beauty. The INFJ in survival mode is terrifyingly powerful because they've merged empathy with detachment, kindness with discernment, and love with wisdom. They can see through deception, understand human nature at its darkest, and still operate gracefully. Their silence becomes intimidating because it's no longer shy, it's intentional. Their boundaries become unshakable because they've paid for them with pain. They no longer argue or explain. They simply observe and act when necessary. This phase also often triggers a deep spiritual awakening. INFJs, being naturally intuitive, start to re-examine the nature of pain, betrayal, and purpose. Many begin to detach from worldly validation entirely, turning inward toward their higher self or faith for strength. They start to find meaning in solitude, peace in minimalism, and power in detachment. What once felt like loneliness now feels like clarity. The world that once seemed chaotic becomes predictable because they've learned to read it through patterns instead of emotions. But perhaps the most remarkable transformation occurs when the INFJ begins to heal from survival mode. Healing for them doesn't mean returning to who they were. It means becoming a wiser version of that person. They start to reopen their heart, but now with discernment. They no longer love recklessly, but intentionally. They no longer forgive endlessly, but selectively. Their empathy returns, but it's now guided by boundaries, not guilt. They can finally love without losing themselves. When an INFJ remains in survival mode for an extended period, their inner world begins to change in profound, almost irreversible ways. In this phase, their intuition takes on a sharper edge. It's no longer the dreamy foresight that once helped them navigate emotions. Now, it becomes a survival radar. They can sense deception in a smile, danger in a tone, and manipulation in a compliment. Their sixth sense becomes hyperactive, allowing them to detect lies and inconsistencies almost instantly. It's not paranoia. It's a finely tuned awareness born of survival. They begin to trust this intuition more than anything else, even when logic contradicts it. And more often than not, they're right. This heightened intuitive clarity gives them a quiet, intimidating confidence that others can't quite explain but instinctively respect or fear. Their communication also changes. An INFJ in extreme survival mode doesn't waste words. They become more economical in their speech, carefully choosing what to reveal and what to keep hidden. Their language becomes precise, almost surgical. Every word serves a purpose, either to deflect, to observe, or to assert boundaries. They've learned that silence can protect them better than explanations ever could. And so, they speak less, but when they do, their words carry weight. They've mastered the art of emotional economy, saying just enough to maintain presence without exposing vulnerability. Emotionally, their empathy undergoes a metamorphosis. Once it flowed freely, pouring into every broken soul they met. But now, it's filtered through discernment. They still care deeply, but their compassion is no longer unconditional. It is earned. They can look at a person in pain and feel both sympathy and caution simultaneously. They can love someone deeply, yet still walk away if that love becomes toxic. They no longer confuse empathy with self-sacrifice. They've learned that saving everyone often means losing themselves, and that realization shifts how they love, trust, and give. Socially, their presence takes on a paradoxical quality. They are both magnetic and untouchable. People are drawn to their calm aura and mysterious depth, but few can truly access them. It's not arrogance. It's self-protection cloaked in serenity. They've become skilled at giving the illusion of openness while maintaining complete emotional control. They can engage warmly in conversation, listen attentively, and even laugh with others, yet never truly reveal their inner landscape. To the untrained eye, they seem perfectly fine. But those who look closely can sense the quiet distance, the subtle line that says, "You can't come any closer than this." Mentally, they become far more strategic. INFJs in survival mode start to think in terms of patterns, outcomes, and long-term consequences. They plan several steps ahead, almost unconsciously. Every decision, from relationships to career moves, is filtered through one question: will this drain me or strengthen me? They no longer chase emotional highs or external validation. Their focus shifts towards stability, autonomy, and spiritual peace. They may appear detached, but beneath the detachment lies razor-sharp awareness. They can see the big picture when others are still distracted by surface drama. Spiritually, this is often the season where an INFJ either breaks or awakens. Those who awaken begin to experience life from a higher plane of understanding. Pain ceases to be something to escape and becomes something to learn from. They begin to find beauty even in solitude, meaning even in loss, and strength even in vulnerability. The INFJ starts to understand that survival mode was never just about self-defense. It was a purification process. It stripped them of illusions, false attachments, and codependency. It forced them to meet themselves, their true, unfiltered self, without distraction. Psychologically, they begin to redefine peace. To an INFJ in survival mode, peace no longer means the absence of conflict. It means the presence of authenticity. They would rather stand alone in truth than be surrounded by people who drain their spirit. They cut ties quietly, without drama or revenge, because they've learned that silence is the most dignified form of closure. They stop chasing closure from others and create it within themselves. Over time, their emotional energy becomes so focused that it feels almost electric. Their boundaries are firm, their discernment unshakable, and their purpose crystal clear. They develop a level of self-trust that makes them almost immune to manipulation. They can walk away from anything that threatens their sanity without hesitation because they finally understand that peace is the ultimate form of power. Yet even in this hardened strength, there remains a trace of the old INFJ, a flicker of compassion waiting to be rekindled. They are not unfeeling. They are healing. They've simply learned that survival sometimes means walking through darkness until you rediscover the light. And when they finally emerge, they do so not as the same empathic dreamer they once were, but as a serene warrior, gentle in heart, fierce in spirit, and immune to the illusions that once held them captive. The INFJ in survival mode may lose innocence, but they gain something infinitely more valuable: clarity. They see people and situations exactly as they are. They no longer need to be understood to feel whole. They no longer need to be loved to feel worthy. They've learned to belong to themselves, and in that belonging lies an unshakable freedom. Once they reach that point, the world can no longer break them, because they've already rebuilt themselves from the ruins. As the INFJ's survival mode matures into its deepest stage, their perception of reality begins to shift in profound, almost spiritual ways. What once felt like chaos and confusion now becomes a pattern they can read effortlessly. Their mind no longer clings to why things happen, but to what each experience is trying to teach them. They move from reacting emotionally to observing energetically. This marks the emergence of a rare psychological state where intuition becomes almost prophetic. They begin to sense outcomes long before events unfold. It's as if their spirit evolves to operate on a higher frequency, one where everything is energy, vibration, and meaning. At this stage, the INFJ starts to detach from the noise of the world. Crowds exhaust them, superficial conversations bore them, and meaningless distractions hold no appeal. Their senses become finely attuned to authenticity. They can instantly detect insincerity, hidden intentions, and the subtle shifts in emotional energy that others miss. This heightened awareness often drives them into seclusion, not because they hate people, but because they crave truth in a world addicted to illusions. In solitude, they find sanctuary, clarity, and communion with their deeper self. They no longer see isolation as loneliness. It becomes their temple of renewal. During this period, Their relationship with time also changes. INFJs in extreme survival mode begin to live more slowly, intentionally, almost meditatively. Every decision becomes purposeful. Every interaction weighed for energetic cost. They start to find beauty in stillness, the sound of rain, the texture of silence, the light falling through a window. The external world fades into the background as their internal world becomes vivid and alive. They begin to understand that their peace is not something to be found. It's something to be maintained. The INFJ's compassion, once scattered across everyone they met, becomes condensed and laser-focused. They begin to direct it inward for the first time. Self-forgiveness, which they long denied themselves, becomes their greatest act of healing. They start to realize that not every broken relationship was their fault. Not every failure was a reflection of their worth. They see that saving themselves is not selfish, it's sacred. In survival mode, they come face to face with their humanity, learning that their sensitivity is not a weakness to be fixed, but a divine design to be honored. Their dreams also become more vivid, symbolic, and spiritual. Many INFJs in this state experience lucid dreams, visions, or profound déjà vu moments. Their subconscious begins to communicate in metaphors and imagery, offering guidance through intuition rather than logic. It's not unusual for them to feel guided by something greater, a sense of destiny, divine timing, or cosmic alignment. They begin to interpret pain as part of a spiritual curriculum rather than punishment. The darkness that once terrified them becomes their teacher. Their sense of identity undergoes a rebirth. They no longer feel the need to fit neatly into society's boxes or meet others' expectations. The INFJ begins to accept that they were never meant to blend in. They were meant to stand apart. This realization frees them from the exhausting burden of people-pleasing. They stop dimming their light to make others comfortable and start living unapologetically as who they are. Their authenticity becomes magnetic, not because they're trying to impress anyone, but because they finally radiate peace and truth without fear. In survival mode, the INFJ becomes fiercely protective of their mental and spiritual energy. They develop an intuitive understanding of emotional hygiene, who drains them, what environments suffocate them, and which habits steal their focus. They start to curate their life like art, removing anything that doesn't align with their inner balance. Toxic friendships are quietly dissolved. Unnecessary obligations are released. They stop over-explaining their choices because they finally realize that peace doesn't need justification. Another striking transformation is their ability to become emotionally untriggerable. Once easily affected by other people's moods, criticisms, or manipulations, they now respond with calm detachment. They no longer feel the need to defend themselves or prove their intentions. Their self-knowledge becomes their armor. When confronted with negativity, they absorb nothing. When provoked, they simply observe. It's not indifference, it's mastery. They have learned the art of emotional alchemy, transforming external chaos into inner stillness. Professionally and creatively, survival mode can ignite an INFJ's most powerful era. Their vision becomes razor-sharp, their ideas profound, and their focus unstoppable. They channel their accumulated insight into projects that matter: writing, teaching, art, or advocacy. Their work carries the weight of lived experience, giving it authenticity that can move hearts and change minds. Many INFJs who reach this stage become quiet revolutionaries, leaders, healers, or visionaries who shape their world from behind the scenes. Their relationship with other people also becomes more deliberate. They no longer crave large social circles. They crave depth, resonance, and mutual growth. When they connect, it's not by accident, it's by alignment. They attract people who match their energy, respect their space, and understand their silences. Every bond becomes a conscious exchange, not an emotional transaction. An INFJ in survival mode learns to coexist with pain. They start to embrace discomfort as a necessary part of growth, meeting it with grace rather than fear. Their resilience no longer comes from fighting the storm, but from learning to dance within it.